Charlie Scharf, thank you very much for coming out.
Absolutely.
To the Industrialist dilemma. So, what we'd love to kick off with, we do this in the beginning of kind of each chat, is if you want to kind of give a 30 to 90 second, sometimes it goes on for about 8 minutes, but if you can try and keep it to that, sort of level set of the state of financial services and payments in general, and then bring sort of Visa into the picture of what you guys are doing kind of right now around all of that.
Sure. So state of financial services, first of all, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. We are, and it's actually, it's just one of these big issues and big misunderstandings. In fact, when I first got to Visa, there was this big question inside the company when I got there. People wanted to know in every town hall, are we a financial services company? Are we a technology company? And the answer is, we're definitely not a financial services company. We absolutely have to act like a technology company, but we're a payments business, and they're fundamentally very, very different. Mm-hmm. We don't do what financial services companies do. Financial services companies are our direct clients. All issuers are financial services companies, and most acquirers in one way, shape, or form are financial services companies. The payments industry, as you all know, has gone from this extremely boring back office function that no one ever wanted to talk about, right? I mean, if you think back to, if you can remember 10 or 15 years, when you're out buying something, I mean, payments wasn't something that was sexy. You didn't have startups focusing on payments. It was just something that got done, and transactions happened electronically if you weren't using cash. And today we live in a world where it's fundamentally changing, driven by commerce, moving to digital platforms, and driven by digital platforms allowing other people to create either full networks or parts of that value chain that we talked about. And so anyone who's involved in payments who's not thinking that the world is fundamentally different is going to be dead, buried, and gone.
And so assuming Visa is not in that category, so what are you guys doing, and where do you sort of see yourselves fitting in the value proposition of digital payments then?
Yeah, so you all were talking about whether we needed to be focused on the digital world. And the way I think about it is we partake in commerce. That's what we do. I could go through all of our sales pitches about we facilitate it, we help commerce grow faster than it would without us. But the reality is, commerce is moving to digital platforms. If we don't go with it or even lead it, then we will be left far behind. And so the business that we have today it'll take a long time, but it'll be a slow withering away of our business at some point with some kind of acceleration. So if we want to be at all as successful as we've been in the past, we need to do it. And so for us, it's a fundamental change to our network architecture, to who we deal with, which I can get into more detail on what that actually means. And we've got to be willing to do things, quite frankly, that we would have never thought about doing before. And so fundamentally go from this very, very closed, you talk about a network. Within Visa, we were a very closed operating infrastructure, and that doesn't work in the world that we're in today.
Can you, so we had some diagrams of the sort of the transaction process of how a payment actually, works end to end. Maybe at a 30-second kind of level, can you explain the industrial sort of world version of that when things were, pre-internet, how that worked? And do you think we're in a position where that should be rebuilt and redone for a digital world where there aren't as many steps in between? And in that future world, where do you think Visa's value proposition should lie?
Yeah, listen, I think that let me just give you an intro so you understand the position that we're in. Yep. And the frame of mind to answer the question. So, and someone said this before in your discussion, which is we rely on our relationships with the issuers and the acquirers. Okay, and in a lot of ways, the issuers over a shorter period of time can have an extraordinarily meaningful impact on our business, right? It's real simple, right? If you have a Bank of America card or a Wells Fargo card, if they choose not to issue a Visa card anymore, they're going to send you a letter that says throw out your Visa card. They're going to send you someone else's card, and 90-something% of you will use that card. So we have to be extremely, extremely careful about the role that we play, whose feet we step on. To the extent that we do something like Visa Checkout, which is something which appears to be direct to consumer, there has to be a good reason for it. Or we have to be willing to take on our clients. And remember, we have 2.4 billion cards outstanding in the world, and we have 12,000 people. We have 50 million merchants that accept our products, and we have 12,000 people. And so we're not tooled to, as a company, by ourselves, to deal with this infrastructure. So we are a network, but we rely on networks to help deliver our products. And so we have to be really thoughtful about what it means to go beyond that. And so when we think about what happens today, it sounds very, very complicated when you draw it. I mean, most businesses are much more complicated when you actually show every step of what happens. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you do, as successful.
You wouldn't have 50% margin if that were
that's the case too.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, when you look at it, right, there's a consumer and there's a merchant, and they want to conduct commerce together. And the merchant has to have a financial relationship, and the consumer has to have a financial relationship, and we connect them. That's what happens. And so fundamentally, should that change, I personally think the basic structure of that is something that will be hard to change at the scale that we do it. There are absolutely people that can win the long tail transactions and do things that are very different than that. But the way in which we go about connecting and who we connect with and how we integrate the stripes of the world into what we all do will fundamentally change who partakes in that value chain.
When you look at the changing payment landscape, what do you think is the biggest change over the next 5 to 10 years? And what's Visa specifically doing about it, both internally and externally?
Yeah. So I guess let me back up again. So we live in three worlds. And so I guess you also asked this question a little bit about priorities and whatnot. And they're three very distinct worlds. And we're not picking and choosing between the three. We're dealing with all three. Number one is we do have a traditional business, most of which is physical cards, where we deal with issuers and acquirers. And we compete every single day with MasterCard, and it's going to be UnionPay in China, and it's local networks, and it's American Express on co-brands, and they're all tough competition. And if you ask me how I spend my time, there's a more significant portion of my time than you would expect dealing with these big relationships, because that is our lifeblood today. Second piece of it is the developing world, right? And so there is a lot of dark space out there, which is huge opportunity for us. And it's not just Africa, it's parts of the United States. In the United States, half the transactions still aren't electronic here. So so yes, the growth rates in the US are half of what they are in the rest of the world, but it's a lot of dollars for us to go after. So the idea of continuing to penetrate electronic payments, of which there's, when we went public in 2008, there was something like, my numbers will be a little wrong, $6 or $7 trillion of cash in the world in commerce. Today that number is 11 or 12. So there's more cash today than there was when we went public, and we have more means to disintermediate than ever. And so the third bucket is digital, right? And it's what I said before, which is we have to deliver our products and our infrastructure, and the way we do business has to fundamentally change so that we can integrate with people who are driving commerce experiences in one way, shape, or form. And we have to be there where digital transactions are taking place. And that's very different from what we've done in the past.
So not everybody can win, though, as we move from an industrial world to the digital one. And so in this new sort of restructuring, who do you think is under pressure in that value chain that we've talked about, or in the ecosystem broadly? Or under the most pressure?
Listen, I think, remember, all these people in the value chain are our clients in one way, shape, or form. So,
yes.
We're
all going to grow.
Be careful here.
Yes.
No, honestly, listen, I think everyone who is in the flow of that transaction should be scared to death. Mm-hmm. And, you can look at whether it's the bank, whether it is the network, whether it's the acquirer, or the equivalents in the e-commerce world, that all should sit back and say, can I be replaced? Because the answer is, theoretically they can, so what are they doing about it? I personally look at the role that we play, and I think in a lot of ways, again, in terms of scale, because remember, we are, you always hate to talk about size because, the big, dumb, and stupid usually kind of go together in a phrase. But the fact is, things that scare us are things that can actually scale across the world in one way, shape, or form. And when you talk about that, you talk a much more limited sphere.
Right, like cryptocurrency or digital payments. What?
Cryptocurrency is a complicated one too.
Sure.
It's because it's blockchain more than cryptocurrencies. Right. The currencies themselves are, I find, relatively uninteresting. They will win small tail transactions on the margin. Very, very hard to believe that it'll scale in a meaningful way across the globe with governments. But blockchain, and especially federated blockchains, do have to. Anyone who has any kind of a network. Doesn't matter if it's a payments network, a network where you trade securities, real estate titles, all these things. You really do need to be thinking about not just the cost, but the permanent record that gets created with these. That's, again, I don't put that in the category of something that we worry about in the next 4 or 5 years, but absolutely beyond that.
What? So if your customer and your kind of key partner in this effort is the bank, but the consumer is the end user, and you sort of are relying on them as a channel. How do you deal with the fact that sort of you're one step in between the ultimate consumer of your capability and either the services that you need to offer and go into? You said stepping on people's toes. How do you sort of deal with that whole complexity?
Yeah, I mean, delicately. I mean, it's I guess first and foremost the resources
and most importantly, deal with it in such a way where of sort of somebody disrupting you doesn't just go around that entire process and not have to deal with the same kind of relationships that you deal with.
But again, talking about people going around us, it's again, you just think about how hard it is for someone to do everything that you can to connect 2.5 billion people with 50 million merchants in 200 some odd locations around the world. And so there are domestic networks across the world. So you go to Canada, there is a domestic debit network called Interac. You go to Australia, there's a domestic network called FPOS. There are domestic networks, but number one is they're not interoperable across the world. So anyone who has one of those cards that travels across a border needs another branded card. And their capabilities aren't anything close to what a real network would have. And so there are severe limitations to what these individual networks can provide for. And so, again, so we have this, amongst you all, I hate to say, we have this incumbent advantage that we really have to use to our advantage. And if all we do is ride the incumbent advantage, it will be a disaster. But having that gives us a fair amount of lead time to pivot in different directions.
So specifically with that incumbent advantage, what's Visa doing differently now than, say, when you joined 3.5 years ago, or even versus 5 years ago?
Sure.
So what's your team doing differently?
Yeah, so historically, we would only talk to an issuer or an acquirer. When I mean like we wouldn't talk to anyone, literally, if we would get a call from Apple that would say, listen, we got this great idea, we want to work on Apple Pay, we would say, that's great, why don't you go talk to the 15,000 banks that we deal with and go talk to all the acquirers we deal with, and when you have contracts and when you set up standards with all of them, come back and talk to us. That's literally what we would have done historically. And so what we've done is, number one is we have started to treat a much broader set of people, again, people who can insert themselves into commerce or into the payment streams as people that we should have relationships with, and to figure out how we can bring people into the payment stream in a way which I would describe as friendly to us and our clients. We also have the benefit of there are a lot of people that are not far from this campus that have tried to step into the role of a network and of a bank, hasn't worked out, and now they are doing things which are much more friendly to the ecosystem because they don't necessarily want to make money just from payments. They want to do what they do.
Yes.
Right? They want to sell devices. They want to bring people into their ecosystem. And, payments is a way to solidify that. And the question is, do they want to deal with the regulation that the banks have? Absolutely not. And so in a funny way, regulation, while I can talk about what we like and don't like about it, it does provide a barrier entry to some people who just know better than to go there.
So Apple calls you and they say, hey, we're doing this Apple Pay thing. And you have an ecosystem-centric approach, so you take the call and you don't sort of pass it along to the 15,000 banks. Where do are you generating new value because of that kind of partnership? Where do you live in the stack in a different place because of Apple Pay or Google, Android Pay, or what has changed about your business model then because of that?
So the most significant thing that we did with him is we created tokenization, which is just a fancy way for randomizing your account number so that it can sit on a mobile device in a way that we're all comfortable with. So if that device is compromised, your account isn't compromised. But beyond that, what we do, and this is what networks do, and we, by the way, we work with MasterCard, American Express, and even Discover on things like this, which is we want to create open standards so that we can define how accounts are provisioned onto devices, how the transaction flow then works, because a tokenized transaction flow is very different than when you've got the account number flying across the payment system, and we want to make it easy for everyone to participate in that. So think about it as we've got the platform, but we create the standards by which all these transactions can flow, so that we do that with Apple. We, MasterCard, the rest agree on what those standards are. And then very, very easy for any bank in the world or any merchant in the world to come be part of the ecosystem. Without us doing that, again, it would have to be one-on-one conversations, and someone would have to try and set the standard, and we have the ability to do that.
Are you, with anything that could, how, I guess, in the longer term, 5 or 10 years out, how worried are you about things that could disintermediate a bunch of that in-between sort of transaction area? So if Google entered and directly connected small businesses with the consumer, and sort of the entire payment stack was just, the old form of payments in the industrial world where we had to have the network just goes away because you can actually connect the buyer and seller together. Is that a real threat, and do you have to do anything today to sort of worry about that?
Yeah, listen, we as a company worry every single day. So when I say things I'm worried about, not worried about, even the things we're not worried about, we spend a tremendous amount of time, more so than any other place I've ever worked in any other job. The things that we think we're not worried about, we still spend a tremendous amount of time on saying, do we have it right, do we have it wrong? What's different today than yesterday, because the world is changing so dramatically. And I think we're in a good position today. And again, part of what we want to do is, to the extent that you can, if there are people out there that theoretically can make these connections, then what you want to do is it's in our interest to work with them, to have them believe there's a better way for them to go about doing their business. I really believe it is better for them to partner with us than to do what we do on their own. Right. And then they'll see it themselves.
So if the three of us were sitting here 5 years from now, and it all went horribly wrong, something new, some big disruption, what would be your best guess is that what went wrong that would have hurt Visa?
Oh, biggest disruption. Well, we haven't talked about security. Security is paramount to who we are. So when we think about who we are and why people trust the Visa brand, is because they actually trust the transaction. They trust that you can use the card, that it's going to work quickly, and it's safe and secure. And if something goes wrong, it will be fixed because of the rules that we have on our ecosystem. So as we open up access to our capabilities, which you asked the question I didn't really talk about in the past, which is things that we're changing are, in addition to working with people like Apple's in the world, is we're opening up our capabilities through APIs, which we never allowed anyone other than an issuer or an acquirer to get access to integrate our capabilities into their ultimately commerce experiences, whatever those are. And that changes the whole security game for us, because when you have a very closed network, which we've had, which is exactly what it was, as you all know, much easier to control than when you start opening up your universe to the world.
Were there people inside of Visa who didn't want you to open up your APIs?
Oh, absolutely.
How did you handle that?
They're no longer here.
Oh.
No, listen, I think it's one of these, in all seriousness, and I say that, Visa, I think we're blessed to have great people at the company. And just to give you an idea of the growth, when we went public, we had 3,500 people in 2008, and we have 12,500 today. So in addition to turnover, we just brought a lot of people in from the outside, some through acquisitions, small number, 1,500, the rest through the growth that we've had. And so we've been able to bring in the types of people that either have the skills or think about the world the way we're thinking about the world. And the fact is, most of the people come in to Visa, they want to do a great job, they know something, and they're very open-minded. And there's some people, and generally it is the more people, it's the people at the senior levels, because they know one thing, they do things one way, and the world has to change. And and when you look at our management team, it's about a third people who've been at Visa for a long time. It's a third people that got there when the company went public, and it's like the third people that I brought in. Not by design, that's the way it turns out, and I actually think it's a great mix.
How much of your time has to be spent on then the new initiatives? Like you obviously they have this complex job because you've got you have regulators, you have partners, you have traditional competitors, you have new markets, and then you have the whole digital strategy. How do you sort of spend your time to make sure that you're putting the right allocation in the areas that you think are going to then be most important?
Yeah. So here's what I spend. So let me say it this way: I have to fight to spend time on issues like this, because like any other job, you can see you sit there and there are always issues, there are always problems. Generally, when in our partnerships with banks, we're probably the largest partner because of what they pay us, and we control interchange. So, when it comes to dealing with the banks want to deal with the CEO. They don't want to deal with someone else. And so you can get sucked into spending all your time doing that, but I need to force myself to make sure I'm putting the time in. I also, I'm sure every CEO has this, I travel 65% of the time, 60 to 70% of the time. And wherever I go, I spend a third of the time with clients, a third of the time with government because it's so important, and a third of the time on internal activities, probably split 25% between just like a normal business review of results, what's going on, and then try and do 75% on what's really going on in the market. Because we're talking about payments like it's one business. It's extraordinarily different across the world. Someone talked about Africa, the way payments are, the way digital payments are conducted, and what the opportunities and the solutions that will work in Africa are very different than in Indonesia, very different in Vietnam, very different in Brazil. The developed world, the United States, Canada, Australia, much more similar, but the opportunity for us is much broader than the developed world.
What, as it relates to your time in the kind of organizational structure and sort of having to make sure that people are then spending their time on maybe the most important and potentially the most disruptive things, have you had to create any either sort of organizational units that are separate from the core business that are either doing disruptive things or doing things that have a different margin structure or a different technical set of capabilities to ensure, like how has that played out? How has that worked?
So early on, yes. So when I first got to Visa, absolutely there was I would call it like a ring-fenced group that did all of these things that were out of the ordinary course for Visa. Because the fact is the organization would kill it. And they'll try, every little thing, whether it's because we can't do this because of technology, we can't do this in pricing because of what it's going to do to everything else. And, and the way organizations kill things is by not getting things done. And so, absolutely, we get, controlled resources, clear mandate, and I don't mean it this way because we are a management team, but it was like we were going to, other people weren't going to stand in the way, and that was very, very clear. I think now it's 4 years later. What I feel great about is
what part of the business did that have to happen in? Well, what was ring fenced?
Anything having to do with things that involved us in digital, or where we were dealing with new, what we would call clients other than issuers and acquirers.
Like developers?
Anything, whether it's salespeople or relationship people that are talking to the Amazons in the world, the Googles, the Facebooks, whether it's people that are building out the APIs for the ISV community. Anything which was different, just ring-fenced into a group. It's very different today, by the way.
How did you manage the cultural implication of, here's the future and the exciting stuff, and you're working on the old stuff, and we're going to cash cow you and invest it in the future? Yeah,
hugely important. I'll tell you what I did, because there's no doubt that is the huge risk in it. Everywhere I go, every town hall, every conversation, always talk about the importance of the existing business. So I just did a town hall last week across the whole company. The first thing I talked about, with all the stuff going on in payments, the first thing I talked about is the holiday season. the boring holiday season where we had 100% availability. We increased our ability to process transactions up to 56,000 transactions a second, and it's flawless. And because we got huge swaths of people inside the company that work their butts off to do that. And so appreciation, respect, and transfer that to, because we've been so successful at doing these things, that gives us the license to go do all these other things. And over a period of time, constantly explain why those things are important. And we've even had people come in from the outside. We had a brand new client come in and talk about why they chose us over someone else and how they think about us versus just other generic options out there. And they don't talk about the processing. They don't talk about the fact that we can clear and settle their transactions. They talk about all the other value-added things that we're doing to help them navigate the world of payments.
So you're the sort of trusted partner across all these different dimensions for those players.
Yeah.
When you...
Can I say one thing?
Please.
Just one thing I will say, though, is one thing I feel great about inside the organization is it's not ring-fenced anymore.
It's fully integrated.
It's fully integrated because that's the way we think. That's the way we think. And so, we've got, the people developing what we call the Visa Developer Center, which are our API stack, the people who are working on these outside parts. Everything is integrated into the company, and it's part of the conversation now because people understand that's what we need to do to be successful.
Right. You guys have now famously invested in a handful of fairly disruptive startups in the payment space.
Yeah.
I think Square was just announced, and certainly Stripe is an investment you guys have done. How do you, strategically, I guess, why you're doing that, and how do you see partnering with these digital companies and potentially, and then investing or eventually even maybe M&A? How do you sort of prioritize all of that?
Yeah, so, they're all a little bit different. I think, so you talk about Square. We invested in Square. We actually invested in Square a long time ago.
Right.
We invested in it because we believed that they could do something which would help grow electronic payments. And the fact is, we sit here today, just a couple of years later, Square, I don't even know the current number now, but something like 7 or 8 million people accept our products that never were able to accept them before. And and everyone was talking about a Square. Do we like them or not like them? We love Square.
Right.
Square absolutely. Square does a great job in providing value back to the merchant. Right. So we did that because we wanted to give the endorsement to something which we thought could be really helpful to helping grow the market. And yes, obviously, we'd like to make a little money alongside. Stripe is something very different. I think Stripe is and Stripe inside the company was a little controversial, not because they compete with our core business. They don't. But we bought a company called CyberSource that owned a company called Authorize.net that theoretically does what Stripe does, meaning they enable merchants to accept payments and to manage the payments in e-com and mobile. That's what they do. And it's a great company, great people, great acquisition. We've done really, really well. The reality is Stripe's better. They're faster. They are very tightly focused on the app space in a way that we've been slow to. And so that one, we step back and look at it, and yeah, we want to make some money. Number two, we absolutely want to have a commercial relationship with them because they do just a piece of what we do. And we're not going to be able to have 100% of that part of the business. So it's fine that we compete with them, but we want to be their preferred partner because we have belief in them and you saw Patrick, they're smart, quality people that just get things to market that work better than other things in the marketplace. And probably the most important, which I talk about openly inside the company, is we can learn a lot from them.
There's a great video online of us talking where if you want to learn more things from Patrick, that's not a problem. One of the new ecosystems that you sort of touched on is the developer ecosystem. Yeah. It feels like that would have been brand new for Visa in the past 5 or 10 years. Do you see that as, I guess, how do you think about that vector? Is that a growth vector for you guys? Can you monetize that differently? What is Visa as a platform company versus a network for payments?
Yeah. So it's so you say it new for us 5 or 10 years ago. The fact is, we literally, the week before the Super Bowl, we announced the opening of our development center.
Right. I wanted to give you more credit, I guess.
Yeah, that was it.
So you guys have weeks.
We are as late can be to this party. But having said that,
I don't want to say that.
well, it's true.
Yeah.
It's got to be honest about it.
Yeah, fair point.
But having said that, we're not. I mean, we're late to the party, but I don't think we'll. The fact that we're doing it, we got lots of opportunity, and we'll do just fine. Listen, it goes back to.
But what is it? What is Visa as a platform?
So yes, we do all the things that a network does. We connect buyers and sellers and whatnot. But the fact is, we don't get paid what we get paid, and we're not going to be able to survive unless we can convince an individual, a bank, and ultimately the merchant that it's better for you to run your transaction over our network than anything else. Doesn't matter whether it's MasterCard, American Express, something that's ACH related, blockchain, and anything you want to imagine. And so for that, we need to provide value in that. And that can take any one of a number of ways. And we've done that for a long period of time, but we've done it in terms of things that we've built ourselves or the banks or the acquirers. So we've always done a great job on fraud. Right, so when that card is swiped or dipped or tapped across the world, we know obviously who you are, we know where you are, we know if you've been there before, we know generally what type of store it is, we know where you were, if you used your card in a reasonable period. So we know all those things, and we help people determine whether there's fraud, which is why fraud is so low. Even with all the conversations, it's still. We do everything we can to drive it to zero. We've always done a great job, and most of the other payment systems out there, especially that are focused on ACH, don't do that. And so it might sound like it's a very boring thing, but it's a tremendous amount of money, and the risks are getting bigger and bigger. And then you add to that things like receipting capabilities. I mean, we see the transactions. Right now you wait until the end of the month to get your statement, or if you have Apple, you can get something there. They're really neat things that people would do with that. Think about people whose ecosystems that you're on all the time, and would you like to have your information in one place? How would you like it to look? How would you like that receipt to be integrated with something else you might want to do or something you've already done? So, and the point of view for us is, listen, that's not what we do for a living. We've done some of those things in the past, but because we're this platform, because we have these capabilities, we want to open up the development, the ability to develop off these capabilities to just a whole host of people. We still will control how they actually get brought to market, but we don't want to monetize it. It doesn't mean that we'll never monetize it, but the fact is, and I say this very publicly, right, which is we make plenty of money on processing transactions, as you pointed out. Okay? What we need to do is come in every single day and continue to convince people, reconvince them that value is there. And you do that by continuing to build experiences and add value, whether it's on risk, whether it's on marketing, whether it's on customer experience.
Great.
Awesome. Okay. Charlie Scharf, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right.